Good morning. Welcome back to another Theory Thursday. Today we're doing a part 3 to these quick fire questions that I found online. A lot of these questions, actually all of them today, are from a site called Guitar Lessons by Brian. So I have no affiliation with him. I have no idea who he is, but I found all these questions online on his website. I thought, what a fun video concept is just running through all these quick fire questions. So I got another 10 for you today. So that's what we're doing today. I have my Casio 230 GA on. No tie, as you can see. Kind of a modern semi-formal today. As always, if you've been enjoying these, please like and subscribe. That helps the channel grow and reach as many people as it can. I love making these, and I just want to keep doing them. So that helps tremendously. I think that's it. So without further ado, quick fire questions. Let's go. Okay, number 1. Are videos a good way to learn guitar? Yes. The downside to videos and books and anything where you don't have a teacher right in front of you, obviously, is the one-on-one instant feedback. You're doing something wrong. You don't know you're doing something wrong, and the person right in front of you can move your finger. Okay, this is what you should be doing, yada, yada, yada. Aside from that, I think my hierarchy of learning goes one-on-one lessons, then probably group lessons, then probably Zoom, and then probably videos, because that's the next thing down from actual, conversation. So at least you're seeing things happen in real time rather than reading about them. So yeah, I'd say it's a good way to learn, especially with all the resources nowadays. I mean, you can learn anything by video now, right, on YouTube. And yeah, is it the very best? No, probably not. But the other thing about it is it gives you access to people that you may not have had access to otherwise. I mean, you have these famous musicians and guitarists putting out videos that, if there was no program like YouTube, how else would you get content from these musicians? So it's pretty amazing stuff, actually. So yes. Number 2, what guitar instruction sources do you recommend? This actually, I'm kind of thinking of this similar to the previous question. The sources, number 1, should be whoever you're taking lessons from. They'll have a plethora of information. If you're just looking for more to read up on, where can you get more? Of course, I'm gonna unashamedly promote my book. I of course have a guitar method book out there. It's a little bit deeper and a little bit more complex than it's for people who are really gonna go in and get their all in on the guitar and dive deep into the theory on why things they are the way they are, instead of just, okay, these are the chords you can learn. Now you can play all these songs. That's great. But why? Right? So that's what my book is, and it's a little bit deeper. So if that's not your route, Hal Leonard, if you're just learning guitar, Hal Leonard has a great line of books. I used to teach, still do some out of one of them quite a bit. I think it's just called Beginner Guitar. It's got an acoustic guitar right on the front of it, but you can use whatever guitar you want when you're learning out of it. Fantastic. It also goes into note reading instead of just the chords. It does both. It's a fantastic book. It takes it string by string, actually. So you just start on the one string and then you add a second, and it's a great progressive book. And by the end of it, you'll have a bearing of, is this for you? Is it something you want to continue? Stuff like that. So that's a great book. I just picked up, I can't believe I hadn't had it up till now, but Pumping Nylon by Scott Tennant. Fantastic technique book if you're into classical guitar. So, I mean, there's tons of stuff out there. And then, of course, videos like we talked about last question. my YouTube channel. There's tons of YouTube channels that just give out free information and free lessons and all that stuff. So, yeah, tons of info, tons of resources. So, okay, number 3. What are power chords? This is a good question. You see them more in some genres of music rather than others. So a lot of rock, metal, stuff with real, chunky. That's where you're mostly going to see these power chords. So what are they? Other instruments like piano, any polyphonic instruments would call these 5 chords. So not 5 in the sense of the 5th of the scale. So a G7 going to a C. Now that is a 5 chord, but this is what we're talking about is a chord that is just the root note and the 5. So in whatever music you're looking at, you might see something called G5 or C5 or F sharp 5. That's what we on guitar call a power chord. So what you're doing is you have your regular triad, right? Your 1, your 3rd, and your 5th. So let's just use G, for example. A G triad is a G, a B, and a D. Now this middle note here is what determines whether something is major or minor. In any chord, in any triad, the middle note determines whether something is major or minor. So if we take that out, you just have the 1st and the 5th. It doesn't have a major or minor tonality. That's just it. So you can really play it over any major or minor chord. So if we can flip it and say, if you saw a G minor chord in the music, you could play a G5 over it. If you saw a G major chord in the music, you could play a G5 over it. Now, the downsides, obviously, it's not a very full chord, right? It's just 2 notes. And you can play them in multiple places. So you can have 3 Gs and 3 Ds, so you can have, 6 notes all being played, but it's really just 2. And, but it just doesn't have any resolution to it, does it? So that's what it is. It's an easy way to get through chords and songs, and great resource if you're in the genres that use them, because they are very distinctive. Really easy on guitar too. I should have explained this. It's just 2 fingers. Usually is how people play them. Let's say we're trying to play a G5. You'd put your index finger on the low E string, 3rd fret. There's your G, and then you put your ring finger on the 5th fret A string, which is a D note. And you just play those bottom 2 strings, and that's your chunk, 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 chunk. Okay, that's a G5. That's what we call a power chord. Cool. Good question. What are open chords? Talk about chords today. So, open chords are probably the first chords you learn. It's really simple. If you're playing a chord and you have an open string that's ringing, that is what we would consider an open chord. So let's go back to G, just for an example. If your middle finger on the 3rd fret, low E string, your index finger on the A string, 2nd fret, B, and then you have 3 open strings, right? And then your ring fingers on the top E string, 3rd fret. You strum all those notes, you have a G chord. 3 of those strings are untouched, and they're ringing, and that's what we would call an open chord. So all of those chords you probably learn, and sometimes we call them cowboy chords, right? G, C, D, A, E, E minor, A minor. All of those are what we would call open chords. Now, what's the reverse of that? 2 ways you can think about this. Bar chords, or you can call them closed chords. Now, those 2 terms aren't exactly the same. And here's why. A bar chord inherently has a bar in it. And you can take one of those open chord shapes you learned and move it up the fret, move it up the neck, and play. So let's say you just take the E shape, move it up to the 3rd fret, play the E shape with a bar on the 3rd fret. That's a G chord with the E shape. Now, technically, that's a closed chord because you don't have any strings that are ringing, open. Your fingers are touching all of them. All the strings that are ringing are being touched. Now, it's weird because you're taking an open chord and moving it up and just slapping a bar on it. Now, what I mean when I say closed chord is if you are, make a chord in. Okay, I'll talk about it. So there's chords like C major 7. Let's use this. Extensions where, especially in jazz, this is very, very common, where the shape is index finger on the A string, 3rd fret. Your ring finger is on the D string, 5th fret. Middle finger on the G string, 4th fret, which is your B. And then your pinky is on the B string, 5th fret, okay? So your fingers are only touching the inside 4 strings. You're not touching either E's, and you play that chord without playing the outer E strings. That's what we would call a closed chord, because you're not letting all the strings ring. You're only playing the strings that your fingers are on, and there's no bar, so you can't call it a bar chord. So that's what we call that. So those are the two things. If it's an open chord, it has strings that are open. The opposite of that would be a bar chord, which is just taking an open chord and plopping it somewhere else on the neck, and closed chords. I maybe went into too much depth on that one. What is an electronic tuner? Electronic tuner is something you see a lot of musicians use now, where usually now you see them clip onto the end of a headstock, and it picks up on the vibrations of the instrument, and it'll tell you, oh, this is an E2, or this is a C4, and it's just all done electronically. And I mean, they make them in actual, you can actually go buy an electronic tuner and just picks up on the sounds you're making. You can use your phone. I'd call that an electronic tuner. It's just a way to tune your instrument. And that's that. What is a pitchfork? Question number 6. What is a pitchfork? So before we had electronic tuners, this is how we tuned. Yeah, and this was like how pianos got tuned. And so what it is, it's a piece of metal, and it kind of looks like a real thin U, and then with a stem sticking out the bottom of it, almost like a wine glass without a base. Okay, so it's all metal, and what you would do is you'd hit it against something, usually your knee, and the metal's ringing, right? Kind of like a bell, and it would have a pitch on it, say C4, and that's the pitch that it would ring, right? So it was crafted so precisely, just the right amount of metal so that when it is vibrating, it produces a specific pitch. And that's what a tuning fork is, or a pitchfork. Call it whatever you want. Tuning fork. But that's what it is. It's a piece of metal that rings a very specific note. Question number 7. What is a pitch pipe? What's a tuning questions today? This is something you would pretty much only see in choral settings. What it is if you can picture a harmonica, it's kind of like a harmonica, except instead of being one bar, right, it's a circle. And on the circle, there's usually, they make them in all kinds of things, but there can be 12 slots for the 12 notes in Western music. In whatever, I'm sure they make them in different octaves and all that stuff. But yeah, whoever's directing the chorus would, before they'd start a song, it's usually an a cappella is when this happens, because if you have an instrument, the instrument can give the note, but if it's a cappella, the director will use the pitch pipe and blow a C4 or whatever their starting note is, so they know where to start. Otherwise, it's just pandemonium. No one knows where they're starting, right? You need to have a relative pitch. So even if that's not your pitch that he's blowing, you know where you are relative to that. So if the pitch is da, and you know you're a third above that, da, da, or fifth, da, or an octave, da. I'm not a singer. That's what a pitch pipe is. It's a harmonica, basically, with all the notes. Okay, question number 8. When changing strings, is there anything I should know? You should know, if you're going to change your strings, how to properly change your strings. I I don't know how else to answer that. Yeah, I mean, just know what strings you're getting, what's your guitar and what are the correct strings that should go on it. And if it's something like a classical where you're tying strings, know how to tie the knots and which strings to tie this knot and how many loops and yada, yada, yada. So if you're changing strings, just make sure you know what guitar you have and what are the proper strings that should go on it. Question number 9. What is palm muting? This is a specific guitar technique that is really cool. So, and it's all done with your right hand, your picking hand. When you're playing, you can stop the strings from vibrating by putting your hand on the strings, right? You know that when you're trying to mute yourself, put your hands on the strings, they'll stop vibrating and making sound. Also, what you can do, though, is you can lightly put the right side of your hand on the strings while you're playing. And it gives it this real cool muted sound. So there's no ringing. It's just real quick. It's thumpy. It's muted, I think, is the perfect word for it. And it's great. It's called palm muting. So yeah, it's just real chunky, and give it a try. You just take the right side of your picking hand, or the left side if you're a left-handed, and place it on your strings while you're playing. And you can trial and error with how much to press on it, how little. And there's all kind of sounds you can get out of the guitar just using your right hand, right? Let alone your left hand and what you're doing over here. But yeah, that's what palm muting is. Cool technique. Question 10. How can I improve my rhythm? Metronome. That's going to be your best friend. If you're trying to improve your rhythm, first you need to have tempo ingrained in your soul. And if you're playing with any other musicians, you'll know this already, but you need to have a tempo, a rhythm-based agreement, right? Because, if everyone's playing at a different tempo, nothing's going to work. So metronome, make sure when you're practicing rhythms that you're doing it with a metronome so things are landing exactly where they should be. If you're trying to, play around with getting ahead of the beat or laying back, and metronomes, just metronome. I think that's the best answer. Just whatever you're doing, do it with a metronome. It will be your, what's the word? It'll call you out there. It has no shame in calling you out because whatever it's doing is correct. And if something sounds weird, it's you. That's the beauty of the metronome. Is if you're out of time, it's not the metronome, it's you. So if you're trying to improve your rhythm, everything you're doing, do it with the metronome, and I promise you, everything will be better in your life if you practice with the metronome. So, all right, I think that's good. That's enough information for today. 10 questions. If you've been enjoying these, like always, please like and subscribe. It helps out me. It helps out the channel. And it helps get this to people who want to hear it. So I think that's it for today, and we'll call it. I'll see you for the next one.